I was staying with my great uncle at Boston in Lincolnshire. And he was sitting in an armchair like this with wooden arms, and I was sitting on the side there, and everybody was around, and they said to me, "Shh, be quiet. We've got to listen to the radio."
This morning, the British ambassador in Berlin handed the German government a final note stating that unless we heard from them by 11 o'clock, that they were prepared at once to withdraw their troops from Poland, a state of war would exist between us. I have to tell you now that no such undertaking has been received, and that consequently this country is at war with Germany.
There was going to be air raids because all the London children had been evacuated. So they decided I was to stay there. So I went and stayed there and went to a primary school there in Boston. So this is where my war started. I was an evacuee.
Actually, the day the war broke out, my friend Jill, who lived in the King's Arms, and I were out at Lee Farm. And we walked back to Hartland through the Vale. And Jill reminds me that we were scared that soldiers were going to jump out from behind the trees for us.
39 it started, yes. So I was 21.
Do you remember the day it started?
Yes, because I had my grandmother stay. I mean, she fell down the stairs.
Basically changed because although we supplemented our income with visitors, a bed and breakfast and visitors, because the house was on the main road, the A39, basically changed because we could no longer do paying guests. We finished up with a lot of people evacuated from London and that area because they were getting away from the bombing. So instead of just being mum, dad, myself, and my sister, it turned out to be 2 other families, and we finished up with 12 of us in the house.
Of course, the thing that made a big difference was when the evacuees arrived. Poor little children, they arrived in buses and all went over into what was the church hall then, now the parish hall. And my uncle was the billeting officer and had to find them homes to go to.
We had 2 evacuee boys, but unfortunately they hadn't been with us for about 4 to 6 months, and I had scarlet fever and had to go into hospital for a month. So of course they weren't, they got somewhere else. And then we had a private family, a Jewish family from London, and they wanted a safe haven for their baby daughter and the nanny. So they came and lived with us, the nanny and the child. And I had my little boy then, so nanny looked after the both children, which was fine.
For the first 2 years of the war, because they just evacuated mum, 2 children, and the grannies from 2 families. And they moved in, and that made a complete difference because they were living with us rather than being paid. They had to pay for their keep, but they weren't being waited on like the visitors were waited on. They had to help.
Nothing had happened in London, so Mother and Father decided it was time I went home. So they came and fetched me, and off I went back to the outskirts of London. And then in 1940, you see, I got hold of the Blitz that started, and that's when I really remember, danger.
You could see the sky lit up when there were bombings over Plymouth. in the hostel, we had an airy blanket on our bed. So if the siren went, we got to pick up the blanket and go down to the basement and sleep in the basement.
And every night, as soon as it began to get dark, Mother used to cook the meal. We'd have ours first, and we'd wait for Father to come home. And as soon as he came home, we'd all go down to the shelter. And I can remember once the planes carrying bombs, and Father was saying they're carrying 6 bombs. You could hear them coming. And he was saying, watch out, there's 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and Mother saying the 6th one's going to hit us.
But Exeter was a terrible state. I remember going in there the day after the big blitz, and it was terrible to see, terrible to see.
Be able to go onto the hedge. We'd stand on the hedge near the farm, and we would look at one side. We could see Plymouth burning in the night. At night, this big glow and with Plymouth on fire, and you turn round to the back of you, and you've got Swansea and Cardiff burning, and it was that bit scary because that was getting a bit close.
I remember being in the hospital and the bombs dropping, not the big raid on Exeter, because I lived near Exeter, and the nurse coming around and telling us to put the beds to the wall, candles under the table in the middle. It was a big ward. And in the bed next to me, it was a children's ward because it was scarlet fever. And there was 3 adults there with scarlet fever. I was one and 2 others. And the other lady in one of the beds, her husband was a prisoner of war, and she was so upset and crying. And I said, come into bed with me. And it was so. And I remember the sister coming around with her torch, and she went, where are you? Where are you? She was going when she saw the empty bed. I said, it's all right, she's here with me.
And these V2s did frighten me. I realised what would happen because I thought, any time now, I could be dead. There was no warning. It was just this immense explosion and everybody died.
The only time that I was really scared and noticed it was my mum had sent me down to the field to pick. I don't know what it was I had to pick. One of the vegetables for a meal. She said, oh, come on, you can take the basket and go down and pick. Because I'd always been taught how to pick these things from the field. And one of the German planes, it was quite sort of middle of the morning, and there was this plane struggling back across it was quite low, and it was a German plane. Oh my goodness, a German plane. And I actually got down between the row of potatoes because I was frightened. But what I realised afterwards, that it had got damaged and it was trying to limp back. And it'd probably been over Cardiff or somewhere the night before.
There was a kind of a fear, but living in the country, you felt a bit safer than you would. I've talked to my friends in the towns, and they have felt that fear of being bombed and the fear of this. In the country, it's a hit or miss. So there was a fear, but not a great fear.
Now, I can remember I went to a convent right throughout my life, from the time I was 6 until I was 18. And we went to school one day after one of the air raids, and they dropped a bomb, and it more or less destroyed the chapel at the convent where we lived. And I was so annoyed. All the windows were blown out, and that Hitler could do such a thing to us. It was, it didn't seem right that he could send a bomb to blow up a chapel.
The headmaster told us that if any soldiers came and asked us where this was, we'd got to say Timbuktu, because we mustn't help them to know where they were. And the school was taken over, first of all, by a boys' school from London, Highgate School, and then it was taken over by a finishing school for young ladies. Two of them died down there, actually, and they were both from well-known families. One was the daughter of Maxwell Fyfe, who was a politician, and she died when she rode on her bike down to Hartland from Stoke. And at that time, there wasn't a wall at the end of the car park. There was an open shed with a little gap behind it, and she went right through the gap and over the cliff. The other one who died was the daughter of Sir Malcolm Sargent, who was a very well-known musician and conductor at the Albert Hall. She died of an illness.
My dad had to do something other than farming, so he was in what they called the Observer Corps. And he used to go and look out at night, plane spotting. He had to know every plane that was flying. And they had to learn every plane that was flying, and he used to have to go to this special lookout, and there would be sort of a group of three of them. They'd do a night, and they'd take it in turns of being on watch nearly all night.
When the men had to go to war, but we were short of men to do the work. And so, you see, it was the women's lot then to have to go out and help in the fields and things and do what you could do. And the land army girls, well, that was another kettle of fish. They came out thrashing days. They stayed with me not very long because we didn't have a dairy for the milking and all that to do. So they only stayed with us over the thrashing days and perhaps for 3 or 4 weeks. I remember it was thrashing days, and they came in, they were black, and their little eyes looking out, their faces were black with all the dust coming from the thrashing machine. You thrashed the corn then, not the combines then. Because the men had gone, and we didn't have the labour to do the harvesting. That's why we had the prisoners of war, because they were camped about 3 miles from us. There was a prison camp, and they would bring them in the lorry, distribute them around different farms, or wherever they wanted work. Picked them up again at night. One of them was a German, and he was good. And he was a builder by trade at home in Germany. And on the farm, we got a very old big farmhouse and lots of buildings and things. And he stayed with us over that winter before his armistice that year. And they'd bring him from the camp in the morning and drop him. And he built in a fireplace in the kitchen. He did out a bedroom. He plastered walls. And I treated him like one of the family, and he would sit and have his dinner on that. He'd bring a few sandwiches from the camp, but we used to give him his meals. And when the war ended, and he was still working up just before that, and I always remember, I thought, well, I'd love to have him in here, really, because he'd been a very nice chap. He didn't go to war because he wanted to go to war. He had to go to war. And because of that, I felt, well, I do hope that they're treating our prisoners well, as I treated him. I was only one. And I remember packing up a little parcel of little things for him to take back to his family. He'd got 2 children.
But we had 1 egg per week, per person. We had 2 ounces of butter per week. We had the awful margarine. This is why I never eat margarine now. Full butter I go for, thank you very much.
Being on a farm, you had milk, you could make some cream, you had poultry, you had eggs. We were allowed to kill 2 pigs a year.
I know my sweet ration was, that was hard on children. When I look at them, they go along with all these lovely sweets all along the counters now. We used to have 3, well, it'd be equivalent to 3 little bars about that of chocolate a month, a calendar month. And that was all you got. And we used to have a coupon for that. And it was on a card and it had to be cut off, and they saved the card. They saved the coupon off this card that you had. I'd eat it all in 2 days. 2 days and it'd be gone. And then I'd have to go without. It was quite hard. Mum and Dad used to save all their coupons and rations, so that we had sweets and chocolate at Christmas.
I had a large tin of fruit, and we couldn't get fruit or anything tin stuff. There was no coming in from abroad. And I can remember I had some people come in, and I thought, well, I've got this tin of peaches or whatever it was. I opened the tin of peaches, and I always remember that tin of peaches because it's the last one we had.
When the day the war ended, I was at school in Barnstaple, and there was a girls' grammar school and a boys' grammar school next door. We were parted. And we heard cheering from the boys' school, and then it filtered through to the girls' school that the war was over. So we all went berserk. We ran back to the hostel, picked up some of our clothes, caught a bus down to Bideford. There were 6 of us, I think, Hartland girls. And O'Donnell's lorry was in Bideford with the milk churns, the empty milk churns on the back, because they'd taken the milk into Bideford. We climbed on the back of the lorry and sat on top of the milk churns and arrived back in Hartland. And when we got back in Hartland, my mother said, "What are you doing here?"
We were all excited, and we got the radio on, and we were all, I know I was sitting on the settee, and everybody was sort of, I think all the neighbours were coming in, and it was all very, very sort of excitable. And a boyfriend of mine, he came and knocked on the door, and he wanted to know, could he take me to the church because they're going to ring the bells? Because during the war you couldn't have bells ringing because that was the sign that the Germans were invading. So my father wouldn't let me go. So I can remember being a little bit annoyed. But no, that's what I can remember. Everybody being very, very excited. And then afterwards we had a great big party outside. I know we took our piano outside, we made a stage, and all the local talent, as you put it, did turns on this stage, because we lived in a cul-de-sac there, and they put the stage up there, and it was great. Dancing in the street there.